Hey, welcome back to Eliminate the Gap. We are so excited to have you all back joining us. And as you can tell, Delmar is off at school doing his thing, and we are joined with a special co-host. Some of you may recognize her, Sharuk Zidan. She was in a previous episode talking about gender and inclusion, and we had this wonderful live event several weeks ago, and so we're delighted to have her step in as a co-host for this episode. So excited about that. And so welcome, Sharuk. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Absolutely. And real quick, before we jump in, speaking of Global 5, we have, or you have, a conference coming up here November 21st. What's happening at the conference? And give us a quick plug.
The Global 5, as you know, is a network that promotes female leadership. This is our second year of operations and our second global conference. And we felt that this year we wanted to shed the spotlight on female leaders in the era of recovery. We have had a pretty tough couple of years with the COVID and all the repercussions of what took place at the international level. And, the positive impact of COVID, I might say, is that there are a lot of women and female leaders that have, started showcasing their true potential and leadership qualities in moving into recovery, not just for themselves and their families, but also for their communities and economies. So we have quite an impressive group of women that will be speaking during this conference on the 21st and the 22nd of November, and it's virtual and anybody can attend. So hopefully everyone that's listening to this podcast will take some time and, get in there.
Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely share information as part of releasing this episode, as well as just generally putting it out there as the event gets closer. So that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. That's certainly important work, and it's germane to our guest today for sure. I tell you, here at Eliminate the Gap, we've been on quite a roll. We've had some amazing guests, and it just continues to this morning. Fiona Macaulay will be our guest today, and she is a longtime social entrepreneur. Some of you may know her most from her founding and leading Making Sense International for more than 20 years. Wonderful organization, quite well regarded in the international development field. And she has, and some of you may know, she moved on to found another organization called WILD, Women Innovators and Leadership Development Network. And so again, similar to Global 5, it's a network really of
full potential.
Exactly, the full potential. And so we're very excited to have Fiona here this morning. She'll be joining us here shortly. Again, she has done quite a bit over the years, and we're just lucky to have her.
I'm really looking forward to this. So yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so welcome back to Eliminate the Gap. As promised, Sharuk is still here with us. Here being my co-host, Delmar's out teaching math this morning. And as promised, we are joined by Fiona Macaulay of the WILD Network, which we'll jump into here in a moment. But welcome. Thanks for joining us, Fiona.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here with you both.
Absolutely. So let's just get some of the basic stuff out of the way. For our audiences here, can you just share a little bit about what the WILD Network is, and more importantly, why you founded it?
Yeah, thank you. So WILD, which is the Women Innovators and Leaders Development Network, We support professionals and their companies in the global development sector to increase their influence, to build cultures of inclusive leadership, and to scale their impact. So we're really all about helping people at every stage of their career to be the strongest leader possible and to create leadership opportunities for everybody. And the reason I started Wild actually came out of my 20-year career in the global development sector. In my mid-20s, I started a global development consulting company that I was the CEO of and grew over 2 decades. I did economic growth projects in all around the world, so had worked in about 50 different countries by the time my firm was acquired 5 years ago. And in the course of my career, I, of course, as a young founder, as a young social entrepreneur, had the experience of being often the youngest person at the table, often the only female at the table. And as I progressed through my career, the methodology that my firm used was capacity building. So myself, my team, we were always in countries, often in the global south, working with institutions like microfinance institutions, technical and vocational education institutions, government ministries, really the whole panoply of actors involved in economic growth. And so often I would both see behavior towards my female colleagues that was truly, shocking. And I would also often have women colleagues and collaborators kind of steal a few minutes with me, asking for career advice or wanting to talk through confusing situations. And I had this experience of myself, but then also with so many of my colleagues in seeing how challenging it could be to be a young leader, to be a woman working in the global development sector, feeling like you didn't have a seat at the table, you couldn't be heard, you weren't getting leadership opportunities that others were, and ultimately seeing that the global development sector was missing out on this huge opportunity to benefit from all the talent and all the people who wanted to bring their experience and their intelligence and commitment to bear. And the global development sector was missing out on all that. And so when I sold my first company, I decided that this was an opportunity to take my understanding of the global development sector and then also take my training in and experience and research around women in leadership and bring those two things together to create more opportunities for young leaders, mid-career executive leaders to be able to further enhance their leadership skills, and then to also layer on peer learning opportunities from organizations in the sector about what were they doing to build inclusive cultures, what was being doing around diversity, equity, and belonging, what was happening in one firm or one NGO that others could learn about to really speed up that knowledge transfer process. Because that's a little bit of a long explanation, but I hope I've managed to kind of that journey with you.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to pretty much everything that that you said, which brings us to our second question, which is what kind of impact do you see coming out of placing this kind of spotlight for needing more similar leadership around leadership development and gender equity?
Well, thanks. I love that question about impact because ultimately it's very key. We need to understand what is it that Wild is doing? How is it that we're supporting individuals and companies that's making the biggest difference? And here's what we learned. In our most recent impact report, we followed up with global development professionals at all stages of their careers to understand specifically what they had learned or who they had met, what they had done with that information, and what the result was. So let me share two I think, exciting outcomes that hopefully will also inspire others. One was a colleague named Ellen Yunt, who is vice president at MSI. And Ellen has been, an advocate for women in her company for many, many years. Yep. And at the Women in Global Development Leadership Forum in 2018, she heard a couple of our speakers speaking about kind of a cutting edge gender equity certification. So hearing about this certification, what it had brought to other organizations, she became an internal champion of having her own company undertake that process. So I'm so pleased to commend MSI for now being EDGE certified. And the result of that is a very intensive examination around promotion opportunities, around salary equity and addressing any inequities that are found. And it's basically the kind of the world standard in looking at gender equity in organizations, not only in their North American office, but also in their offices in different countries around the world.
Wow.
So think about a company like that employs thousands of people, in turn is impacting millions of people. That's an incredible ripple effect.
You bet.
And bringing things even like say down to the very individual level, something that Wild really believes strongly in is the importance of women asking for and getting the compensation that they deserve. So we have a constant drumbeat and provide with partners support and training and coaching around salary negotiation, both for individual contributors, but also for managers to understand, for line managers to understand the importance of salary equity. And so we have women who have participated in those salary negotiation workshops who have told us that they shared, okay, I took those skills, like I had the notes that I had made, my workbook, I prepared, I went, I negotiated my salary, and I got a much higher salary bump than I have ever had before and that I was expecting.
Great.
Yeah. So who doesn't want that as an outcome?
Sure.
Because Eric, the thing is that if you imagine if everyone working in the social change sector could be 20% more effective, right? 20% more effective because they have the skills and the confidence to use those skills to impact more positive decisions about how resources are deployed, how our colleagues in the global south are getting, greater seats at the table, taking risks on innovation. And if we think about how those leaders are also not only being stronger in their own leadership roles in exerting their positive influence, but also inviting others, to creating space for others. And cumulatively, everybody just got 20%, even 10% more effective in their jobs. Imagine how much more quickly we would be able to have the world, the even better world that we're all working towards creating. And that's really what Wild is committed to.
That's really, really amazing. Until a few years ago, I wasn't really very much aware of, what the concept of being an entrepreneur really meant. And then I started, reading a little bit about it and meeting a lot of entrepreneurs, and given the field that I work in, which is in the TVET sector, technical and vocational education. And all these young people that have these amazing ideas, but they don't really know or understand how to put them in use because of the academic aspect of, defining what entrepreneurship is and what they're actually seeing in reality has often been, completely different and disassociated. And then when with the COVID and everything that has taken place and over the last couple of years, we started getting even better insight in specific terminology and specific definitions as to what entrepreneurship can be. And one of that is social entrepreneurship. And I understand that you have this, you're one of the lucky few that have the academic aspect of entrepreneurship, and then you are actually a social entrepreneur. So I'm really curious, and I'm wondering, has your practice as a social entrepreneur impacted how you teach entrepreneurship in academia? And do we need to start shifting that kind of change where instead of talking about entrepreneurship education, it becomes something that's more project focused and practical? And of course, I'm talking from Middle East and Africa kind of perspective. It may be different out there in the States.
I think there's a universality to what you're saying, and I'm so glad you bring that up. So I am a serial social entrepreneur. So I look to bring sustainable business practices to the social change causes that I work on. And what drives me is that I think every person is capable of incredible things given the opportunity. And so I feel like my mission is on that given the opportunity piece. How can I create opportunities for every person or the people in the orbits that I touch to be able to make their greatest mark in the world, to make the mark that they want in the world? So I would like to think that my experience starting, growing, scaling, selling social enterprises does help me to be a good educator in the classroom. I hope so. For several years, I have been teaching entrepreneurship at the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown University, and I continue to be an entrepreneur in residence there. And actually right now I'm with a fellow entrepreneur in residence coaching a fantastic social enterprise for Georgetown's largest business pitch competition.
Wow.
That's always a thrill, right? Helping people to really kind of craft and get their messages out about the great work that they're doing. And so I think this speaks directly to your question, which is that I feel like as part of that coaching, for example, as she's pitching her social enterprise, I see her walking a line that is very familiar, which is that her business is about, or her initiative, her venture is about social impact. And in this case, it's about women being able to commute safely on public transport in every community that they live in, whether they're in Cairo or Washington, D.C. or Kampala. And
Amazing.
yeah, and she needs to explain the problem they're solving. She also, in this case, needs to show that there's a sustainable business model behind how they are solving that problem, because she's looking for that key startup dollars. So she needs to be able to show not only is she solving a critical social problem, but that she has a sustainable business model to do it. And I think that for the global change makers who typically come, from this place of having a problem that they want to solve, they have a vision for how the world should be that it is not yet, and they see themselves as critical actors in creating that world. I think that complementing that vision with with a host of very kind of specific skills is very important for helping social entrepreneurs to be as effective as possible and to be sustainable and to scale their solutions that they come up with and to build partnerships. So all of these kinds of skills are, I think, are key in building in the current and future generations of change makers. And we have so many great examples out there, right? So many wonderful examples in the MENA region, so many examples from other areas. But so often what people need, I think those young founders and others, middle-aged founders need, is also to understand how critical strong leadership skills are. Leadership skills that are familiar to us, like grit and the determination to keep going. And then other skills that I think are, I would say, more recently gaining more appreciation, like empathy, right? Being able to hold people accountable and at the same time be able to make adjustments and to understand how to best support that individual colleague or partner. Asking for help, right? We don't often think like, oh, great leaders are people who know how to ask for help. But great leaders are people who know how to ask for help, because nobody is expert at everything. And to create significant change, there's always areas that we're going to need help in. So I really admire the work that you're doing, and I think strengthening existing leaders and laying the foundation for future leaders by giving them these kind of mindsets and skill sets is really critical.
Yes, I absolutely agree, especially when we come and talk about skills. It's funny how we as women are often expected to build more skills than others that are, you know, same pay grade or same position. Let's not say pay grade, but in the same positions and everything. And we're always, you know, faced with this whole, you need to upskill or you need to reskill certain aspects of your management or leadership abilities. And for me, for example, it's like, okay, what do you mean by new skills? If you're talking about leadership skills, well, you know, we've been working on that for decades now to be where we are, and that's what makes us great leaders. And then comes the whole aspect of being creative and thinking out of the box, in how one can actually define new skills for female leadership, um, and actually, you know, allow them to be open to all these new horizons and new variety. So, in given you being, you know, one of the you know, the female leaders that has focused on such skills, how do you think we should be looking at that? How, you know, what are the real true skills or true innovative out of the box skills that one should be focusing on acquiring, and how can we actually define it for people to be more accepting to that concept?
Well, you know, I think there might be two issues there that you're talking about. One is thinking about for our own growth and sort of staying current and competitive, what can we be investing in? The other thing is the external lens that's being applied. So one of the things that I'm kind of thinking about and writing about at the moment is on who's getting promoted, who's being given the leadership opportunities. And what we see the research showing is that it's not necessarily truly performance-based. Sometimes those who are, particularly men, are given opportunities who are demonstrating some of those, what I would say, like increasingly kind of becoming out of date leadership skills, meaning people, men who are showing up as being more charismatic and more confident are kind of seen as leaders and given those promotions or greater leadership opportunities. Whereas if we kind of remove both the bias towards men as leaders and that those traits being more important than other leadership traits, such as taking care of the team, problem solving, you know, doing some of the more the behind the scenes leadership work, then we can see, so if we sort of strip away some of that, then we can see that it is not always the loudest person in the room who is the person who deserves the promotion or new leadership opportunity. It's actually may often be the quieter woman who is the higher performer. So I mention that because I think many of us, women and men, share those biases that will mean that sometimes the wrong pick, or often the wrong person, is getting kind of picked for the greater opportunities. And so women, I believe, are often like caught in they are, I mean, and the research shows us as well, that women can often be caught in this bind, where if we think about leaders being judged on two axes, like axes around that kind of traditional strong sets, leaders of like strength, so determination, boldness, charisma. But then there's another axis around that's really kind of caring for the team, ensuring like the well-being of the people, the project, the company. And women who are too high on those kind of leadership strength axes, like too bold, too outspoken, too opinionated, women are given less leeway on those characteristics than men are. And then at the same time, women are expected to demonstrate a higher amount of caring than their male counterparts are. So my view is that it's good to understand the playing field, because if we're the kind of people, and those of us engaging in this conversation in the audience are the kind of people who want to change the playing field, then let's understand where the playing field is now, and let's use the power and influence that we have to understand our own biases around the kind of leadership behaviors that we're applauding and rewarding, and how we can also coach and influence and nudge others to be building the leadership skills and rewarding the leadership skills that truly lead to positive outcomes, whether that's within a social enterprise, whether that's within a global development NGO or company. I think we all have a part to play in our own leadership behaviors, but then in the kind of leadership behaviors we are encouraging and rewarding in others around us.
It's just, first of all, it's just fascinating to listen to the two of you. You'd have this conversation back and forth just as a learner. But it's interesting as particularly COVID, and I know we're tired of talking about that in terms of this like slice of time, but it is certainly a defining moment in our lifetimes, for sure, globally. And so I keep hearing about caring and thinking about the team and those aspects of leadership. And I feel like, and maybe naively so, that COVID really unmasked the importance of that to people that look like me, and start to again, maybe embrace more of that and how important those parts are to leadership. And so I wasn't sure if the trends, if we were too soon for that, but are you seeing anything emerging in that way that might validate what I'm feeling, or maybe not yet?
Well, Eric, I think what we are seeing is this many like articles and emphasis on the importance of empathy. So I think that the empathy has gotten probably more press in the last 18 months than maybe I had seen it get, in the previous,
Sure.
I want to say 18 years. So I think you're right. I think you're right that what I was mentioning a moment ago about the importance of like being able to understand the realities people are facing and still hold them accountable. I like to talk about the accountability with the empathy. And that's for two reasons. One of them is that I know that one of the reasons leaders will sometimes sort of dismiss or had been sort of dismissing empathy is that they had misunderstood that it meant like allowing people to not perform and get their jobs done. But it's not that. It's actually just around flexibility and supporting people to be the high performers that the vast majority of people in the workforce really want to be. So for example, if you have a colleague who's consistently arriving late to like the 9 o'clock team meeting, empathy is taking time to speak to that person one-on-one, for example, and be like, hey, John, I see you're like consistently late to the 9 o'clock meeting. Can you tell me what's going on? Like, why is that? And what you might learn is that John's wife's career is accelerating at that moment. And actually, so John has now taken on the responsibilities of like dropping the twins at daycare. So what John needs is just some understanding and flexibility and adjustment about his situation. So can the meeting be moved to 10 o'clock, right? Can that colleague, can that colleague's work hours be adjusted so that he can continue to be the contributor and high performer he wants to be, and your organization can continue to benefit in the way that you want to benefit and the work can get done by making these sort of small adjustments. And that, I think, is what COVID threw up in the air, was that the reality was that people couldn't keep working the way that they had been working. Physically, they were in a different place. Obviously, the reality of so many people needing to homeschool children while doing their job, right? Be the third grade teacher and do a 40-hour work week within the kind of 9 to 5 timeframe just like wasn't realistic. So it kind of forced so many discussions that we probably would have benefited from having earlier. And that's where I think we just saw this that many organizations did well. I think a number of organizations failed or like maybe didn't do so well at the beginning, but then got better, because the reality was that people's life situations needed to be understood. Adjustments had to be made in order for them to be the contributors they wanted to be. And then I think what we all learned was, wow, there can be all of these different work styles and work hours and like other accommodations made, and organized employers and employees can continue to be successful. So, now that we've learned how to do that, why not keep that going?
Yeah, for sure.
You're right. And this brings me to, the last kind of question I have. I'm very curious to hear your feedback on, and that is, how do we change this whole perception of, female entrepreneurs when they go and seeking resources, that focus becomes on what this project is about and what is being introduced rather than who is introducing it.
Right.
I mean, it is also one of those interesting skills we have to acquire, and part of, creating the whole social change agenda on the other side as well, I guess.
Yeah. So I think if I hear you, part of what your question is referring to is the data that shows that when social entrepreneurs are pitching for investment capital, that they are often, the investors will really dig into minutia in their business models, as opposed to with when men are pitching, they're more likely to talk about like what the potential is and the potential for growth and kind of stay in the big picture. So I think one of the first things I'll say is that is a skill that all entrepreneurs need, particularly female entrepreneurs, because we know of this bias, that they need to, what I call kind of jujitsu the conversation, meaning answer the question you want to answer. So if you're being asked a question that's in the weeds, is a distraction from the larger like vision, business model, like impact, potential that you're presenting, and answer the question that you want to answer. So that is a service to you and your business, but it's also a service to the investors to actually give them the information that they really need to be able to compare your businesses to others that they may be looking to invest in. And the second thing I want to say is that this has a little bit to do with a sort of playing field theme. The good news is partly coming out of the George Floyd murder here in the U.S., partly from the data, right? We're seeing rapid social change at the moment, not only around racial justice, but also about equal opportunities between women and men, of all ethnicities. But there are increasingly communities, investors, networks that specifically want to invest in, let's say Egyptian women businesses, or, women from sub-Saharan Africa, or LGBTQ, women in North America. So find those communities, and I would say invest and think about digging in there, because there is now greater opportunities. There is like greater diversity of investors, diversity of funds, and that can be a great place. I think also when you're thinking about where to put some of your time and money, because it's very expensive, very time consuming to actually go out there and raise money in different ways. But find the communities and networks who want to support either people who look like you or the kinds of businesses that you have, and think about getting your foothold in those, I would say, friendlier, welcoming communities, and because you may get a faster ROI on the time and money that you're putting in.
That's a great response to a very challenging question, and there's a lot more here. I wish we had a lot more time to continue this conversation. One of the things that I'd like to just do in closing is kind of step away sort of from this, but probably not if I'm a betting person. And that is, I wanted to just ask what we generally ask each of our guests in closing here is, help me understand how, Fiona, how you got to this point in your career, none of us come by it naturally, usually. There's always been a support group, a caring adult, somebody in our life, whether early on or whenever it happens, that helps us get to where we are today. Help us kind of, who has that person been for you?
I've been so fortunate over my career to have a variety of different mentors and advisors, some formal, some informal, some family friends, I think, who have helped with a key piece of advice or a key introduction at certain points in time. And, someone that comes up for me in this moment when you ask that is actually Tessie St. Martin, who it was until recently the CEO of the Plan USA Foundation, and recently took over the CEO job at FHI 360 in Washington, D.C. And I bring up Tessie because a few years ago, I saw Tessie stand on stage and talk about some massive failures that she had made and what she had learned from that. And as you can imagine, I was on the edge of my seat, and so were the hundreds of other people listening to Tessie, right? This very accomplished, by anyone's books, very accomplished leader, female leader, stand up there and talk about her mistakes. And I was so inspired by her that when I created Wild, one of the pillars of the way that we convene and share information and invite others to sort of share their knowledge and what can be transferred is through authenticity. And part of that authenticity is sharing mistakes that they have made and mistakes that organizations have made. And this is really the secret sauce of why Wild has been so, I think, effective as a platform to connect women and organizations with one another who want to be even stronger leaders and who want to be even stronger companies. Because, like Eric, as you know, we make mistakes all the time. And it's also fairly rare for leaders, and the more senior they get, to talk about those mistakes. And I would say particularly for female leaders, because we've spent a lot of time putting that armor on, having to be even better than our male counterparts, to reveal chinks in the armor, to talk about mistakes could actually pull the rug out from under your hard-earned accomplishments. And in reality, actually, the more senior you get, the more you can talk about your mistakes because you already have that position of power and influence. So Tessie, based on just, hearing Tessie speak, thinking about the emotions that elicited in me, how important it was for the global development sector, for us to all be kind of honest about where we could be doing even better. I appreciate Tessie's influence on me. And I think in turn, I hope that Wild has been able to sort of pass on the benefits of authenticity to so many other people, because it's when we say, I can do better in this area, that we are open to learning from people who are maybe just be 2 steps or 20 steps ahead of us. And of course, that links back to it's a way of also asking for help. And so again, it speeds up the way that we as individuals can become even stronger leaders. And it speeds up the pace at which our companies, our NGOs, our academic institutions, our government agencies can be even stronger and have that 20% greater social impact. It's by saying, I need help, and it's by others being like, oh, hey, that's an area I can help you in. So let's have a moment of celebration for failure, talking about it, owning it, and getting even better.
No, that's a great example, and I appreciate you sharing that about Tessie in particular. As a former FHI person in my past, and Sharuk as well. Yeah, absolutely, we're very excited to have her leadership for sure on that organization. So pretty excited about that. So, but more importantly, thank you for sharing how that how she and people like her have inspired you to kind of do what you're doing well. This has been a great conversation.
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough, Fiona, for your time with us today. And Sharuk, thanks for stepping in and really adding some depth to the conversation. I greatly appreciate both of you being able to make time for this important subject area today.
And thank you, Eric, for allowing me to co-host this. It's such a pleasure to meet Fiona. Really, it's really so impressive. All these accomplishments that you have undergone is incredible. I definitely hope to, you know, maybe host you one day over here in Egypt, you know, to give us some more inspiration.
Inshallah.
Thank you, Eric. What a pleasure to have this conversation with both of you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you to all of you listening. We will see you next time.